Yeah. And as far as takeaways, have 4 or 5
Yeah.
goals for the year, and then get really deliberate into those. What steps do I need to take to get there? Whether it's acquiring my first property by the end of the year or my, 10th property, whatever it may be.
Welcome. This is the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast, a podcast dedicated to helping others through real estate investing. Our hosts interview guests from all aspects of real estate investing who generously share valuable experiences and advice. Whether you're starting out or an experienced investor, this is the show for you.
Hello, and how's it going? My name is Travis Shelton, and welcome to the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast, where we discuss the mindset, motivation, and methodologies of successful real estate investors. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We're looking forward to a great conversation with a guest we've already had on the Hot Real Estate Investing Podcast, a father, husband, and real estate investor, Vince Mathis. Vince, thanks for joining me today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Travis. Glad to be back.
Absolutely, man. Looking forward to a really great discussion on goals. And that was the big focus on why I wanted Vince to come on the show today, because myself, I actually stole a little bit of Vince's goal retreat this year with me and my significant other, Aaron. And I wanted him to be able to share his process and his focus and kind of his journey to how he's created his own goal setting retreat and just kind of how others can get started. But as always, we start these podcasts off with some motivation. So Vince, will you share your motivational quote today?
Yeah. So especially with my military background, I've got plenty of quotes from leaders from both our and other militaries. So for this one, especially kind of around that goal planning sphere, I want to pull from Dwight D. Eisenhower, where he said, "Plans are worthless, but planning is everything." And at the end of the day, what all that means is that, things are going to happen, things are going to change. You can't account for everything, but going through the process to determine how am I going to accomplish something, what could impact this, gives you that preparation to say, okay, yep, that thing happened like we thought we would. We already had some mediations in place or on the bench to bring in when that happened, and we're ready for it.
I love it. I love an Army quote. I love Dwight D. Eisenhower. And that's just, it proves that some of the most successful people in this world are planners and plan these things out. And, we can always, I say success leaves clues all the time. And I don't think enough times we look at that success of others and really just copy it, like, why not? All right, so let's deep dive in. Let's start maybe, Vince, with why. Why did you start goal setting? Why did you start, incorporating your wife into goal setting? And why is it important to you?
Yeah, so I think I'll tie this back to our first episode when we were talking about how I got started in real estate. Mm-hmm. And so we actually hadn't done this goal setting retreat until after we'd acquired our first duplex, our very first property with real estate investing. And from there, I kind of had this idea of how I wanted to go forward with it. And so I was looking into some different things, had read like The One Thing, strong recommend, as well as seeing things from Brandon Turner of Bigger Pockets and a few other people. And one thing a lot of these successful people did was set some time away, whether it was just for the business or as a family, couple, whatever it may be, and be very intentional around setting some goals for the next year, 3 years, 5 years, and going forward. And so I had actually pulled some free materials from the One Thing's website. And the very first time was just very simple with my wife and I, and things kind of grew from there.
Very nice. So, for someone with a wife who likes to talk about goals, but maybe not always write them down, was your wife on board right off the bat, or was she like, hey, why are we doing this? Was it already a part of her life to have annual goals?
Not as a family. I mean, we both were in kind of corporate HR roles. Mm-hmm. And so, we were used to that process. And so we wanted to make sure it didn't quite feel like that. But we did it around things that we cared about, right? Like I was very invested in real estate investing and building that for our future. We had things we wanted to do with our fitness and our friends and our community. And so being able to focus in those areas that were important to us and say, hey, like these areas have room for improvement and grow from there, we were able to kind of come together on that and grow it into what it is today.
Very nice. Okay, so let's start there with kind of that history. How did the retreats start, and what do they look like now?
Yeah, so going into 2021, I don't remember if it was December or January, going into the beginning of 21, it was just printing this, I think, 3 or 4 page booklet from Productive, the One Thing book company, and it had this outline of 4 or 5 different life areas and discussion questions in each of them. And we did no pre-work. I had printed this out during the day. And we sat down after tucking the kids in on like a Friday or Saturday evening and spent about 2 hours just going through it. Like, where do we have room to grow in our fitness? Are there any challenges we want to do? Where do we see ourselves with friends? And it's not just like high level questions like that. Did a pretty good job at asking very specific things like, you get a call at 3 a.m. and you have to, leave the country with your partner for some reason. And who can you leave your kids with? Right.
Yeah.
And at the time we're like, wow, we don't really have that right now. So a lot of really good discussions came out of it. There were tears, there was laughing, but overall it's been a really good process. And so that was the first year, just like I said, 2 hours.
Okay.
Honestly, we didn't even get to put too much to paper, but we outlined a couple things, maybe put a few things in the calendar, but wanted to be a lot more intentional about it. So the next year we actually planned I think 2-night overnight to San Diego. So just a short flight away, got the in-laws to watch the kids, and spent the weekend in a beautiful hotel on, saved up points and everything. And we're able to find like just neat little places around the hotel or down at the boardwalk to just go through what we've eventually now have as our 6 life areas, our 6 Fs.
Okay.
And go
And it
through
was
them
still
all.
just you two at that time, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
just the 2 of us for the weekend in San Diego, and we also try to tie in, like, we're in San Diego, so like getting down to the boardwalk, going to amazing places to eat, and make an experience of it to really kind of lock it in. And then, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just I keep going. Yeah, I didn't want to cut you off.
No. So the next year we had obviously been talking about this with some people. People saw like, oh, you guys did that San Diego thing. Like, how'd that go? And they see what we're doing in the real estate space and with our church and community, all these different things.
Mm-hmm.
And so we invited a handful of people and wanted to be extremely intentional about it. So we booked the boardroom at the Crown Plaza in Chandler, Arizona, and got a book of rooms, and had our some friends that were close to us join us for the weekend. So obviously that took a little bit more logistics.
For sure.
A lot of prepping all the materials and everything, and guiding those discussions through the weekend. But again, just even more valuable having a community to start doing that process with, and build some accountability into it outside of just my wife and I. We essentially did a very similar process this last year. And then for next year, we already booked a massive cabin up in Flagstaff, and
Nice.
going to have about 6 couples joining us up there. So looking forward to that.
So it started with something 2 hours, and now it's grown, and just you and your wife, and now it's grown into a weekend, a retreat with multiple individuals sharing in the same sort of experiences. So help out the audience, and like, what is the basic outline? You kind of mentioned the 6 Fs, but talk more about the actual retreat and some of the things that you might be doing at these retreats.
Yeah, so I guess first off, kind of some ground rules for the retreat are intentionality, right? And so it means you're not doing any work, you're not taking phone calls, you don't have, if you've got kids, they're not around, even pets aren't there to distract you. So if you can get out of your home, great. If not, obviously, we started on our couch with the dog hanging around, and
Sure.
I think the kids were asleep, so a little bit of intentionality, but really setting aside that time. And I think even if you can do a single overnight and make the most of a day committed to this, you'll really be setting yourself up for a great year. So no distractions, high intentionality, and a big part of it is just openness and honesty, and being receptive, especially to your partner. There's a lot of things that maybe I recognized in my partner as growth areas, or she recognized in me, and not being particularly defensive about things. Maybe there's a reason for it that you guys hadn't discussed to this point. But I don't think there's been a year since we started that, there aren't some hard conversations and maybe some tears. To me, I mean, I think that means we're doing the right thing. Maybe it shouldn't have even taken to the once a year big event.
For sure.
But if that's what it takes, those conversations are happening, and so we're growing stronger through that.
And if I can just interrupt and interject here, I was fortunate enough this year to not unfortunately to go to the retreat, but you did share with me the resources and the materials. And so when my wife and I went to Mexico on a getaway, we went through the entire retreat. And you're so right. There were so many questions that should have been asked a long time ago or should have been discussed at some point. And it was kind of hard sometimes to not like cut off my wife. Ooh, but well, it's like, but it was amazing to ask the question and just sit back and listen to truly her desires and her wants, and and not be judgy or accept that feedback and crucial, in that crucial conversation to say, hey, here's an area where she wants me to be better. As a man, as a husband, as a father. And, it was really amazing. And you're right. Some definitely crucial conversations that really grew our relationship. And so I thank you for that.
Yeah, no, my pleasure. It's never been about any cost or anything like that. I think at some point, maybe it'll become that, like we'll be the next, the one thing goal setting retreat or something. But I thoroughly enjoy putting it together and pulling from 4 or 5 different areas, and so I think to go back, I had mentioned the 6 F's, right? And so what those are just how I have taken from a few different places where they've had things organized a few different ways and done what we call the 6 F's. And so those are your faith, family, finances. I'm looking over here at my cheat sheet to make sure I don't miss anything.
No worries.
And in finances, I have real estate and business, anything like that as well. Your friends and your community, your fitness, and overall freedom. And pretty much everything that we've come across can fit into one of those, and freedom can kind of be a catch-all or maybe something that doesn't quite fit right. An example of freedom is like, we have a housekeeper that comes every other weekend now. And that was a result of one of these meetings or one of these retreats where we said, we always have a hassle with it. It's always something that especially stresses my wife. And so even if someone can just come twice a month and really get the, toilets clean, kitchen clean, bathrooms clean, all that good stuff, she would feel a lot more free and comfortable within our space.
No, those are great little things that go a long way, and sometimes people forget about that low-hanging fruit or those things that we think are low-hanging fruit, but they take hours upon hours, which can be spent a lot better with family. And so sometimes, they say time is money, but that's a perfect example of where time can give you some more freedom, or money can give you some more freedom and time back with your loved ones, instead of 3 or 4 hours cleaning yourself on the weekends now. Hey, that's 3 or 4 hours now with your family or significant other you can spend really enjoying your time, and then enjoying the clean house, as well, which is not a bad thing either. Okay, so what is that basic outline? 3 days, that seems like a long time to just talk about goals. But for some of us, for others, we could spend 2 or 3 months, so tell me kind of, how many hours are you talking about goals, these 6 F's, or, doing other things with this time?
Yeah. So, and this is, just like everything else, it's evolved over the last couple of years, but what we've really come to is before the weekend, the period, whatever it may be, that you're going to be doing this with your partner, go through all of those 6 F's. And there's, between 10, 15 questions, discussion areas within each of those life areas. Go through it and just reflect on it. So spend maybe 30 minutes as an individual going through and jotting down, it doesn't have to be a paragraph for each one. Some notes is fine. But what is your individual immediate response to each of those? It's going through the entire process. And then after that's done, then coming together with your partner, whether it's at a retreat event like I do, or just as a couple at a hotel on the weekend, and walking through those and like, okay, what'd you answer for this one? And if it wasn't, right on sync, which a lot of them will be.
Hmm.
A lot of these things do come up in day-to-day life, but some of
Sure.
them will be like, our parents are aging. What's our plan for our parents? And
Hmm.
every family is in a different place. Maybe one set of parents like, oh yeah, they're set. They got their castle in the Bahamas. They're fine. And another set, you might have a situation where, okay, we might need to take in a parent. And is that
Yeah.
something your spouse is comfortable with? And so if that hasn't been specifically discussed, this is going to bring up questions like that and discussions that at some point are going to happen. And so the more prepared you can be for those, the better. And so going through those as a couple, and then like at our retreats where we've got 3-6 other couples there, going through those and saying, hey, we're not going to go through every single question. That would take forever. Right? We
Sure.
need
Yeah.
way more than the 2 to 3 days. What did you guys have as something that came up that is either something that you're going to need to greatly change or grow in or build this year? And they can kind of walk through that. Oh, maybe it's this parent situation. Like, we
Yeah.
had never talked about our parents, but her dad is going to probably need to move in with us in 5 to 10 years, and we don't have the house for it. We are completely welcome to doing it, but the living arrangements would not be susceptible. Okay, so within the next 5 years, do we need to buy a different house, build an addition?
Yep.
What is that? And you have time to discuss that. Other people can come in. Okay, oh, this is what we did. This is what my friends did. I know this great contractor, whatever it might be, that might help them along the way, right? And so
Yeah, I
growing
love
up
that
that plan.
synergy of the group, and just discussing it amongst each other, and probably also enlightening other people to go, oh, wait, I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah.
Because we're not usually looking 5 or 10 years down the road, right? We're kind of thinking about today. Most people think about annual goals. And I think one of the things you mentioned earlier was really looking at that 3, 5, multiple years down the line of what do we want, and how do we
Mhm.
start building and planting those seeds today, so we're ultimately fruitful in 5 to 10 years,
Yeah. What's your someday? What is your rich life, right? With Ramit Sethi, as he puts it.
Absolutely. So help me, or let's talk a little bit specifically more about real estate investing and kind of where you were that, year one to where you are now, maybe some of the changes you've gone on as far as, making plans for real estate investing, or how this has helped you
Mhm.
achieve some of your real estate investing goals. Because I've known some of your goals for a couple of years now, and in my opinion, you've exceeded a lot of your expectations and goals. And I want to kind of see how did this goal setting help you achieve some of those goals.
Yeah. So, like I said, we had done that first, just couch side 2-hour event
Yeah.
within a couple months after closing on our first property, that duplex.
Okay.
And the way we wanted to attack it was by what Brandon Turner calls the stack, which is where you double your acquisitions every year.
Mm-hmm.
And so, our first year we bought a duplex, which was scary, scariest thing we had ever done,
Yeah.
certainly within the real estate space. But we did it, and there were bumps. I brought in terrible tenants. I brought in terrible contractors. But from that, we built processes and
Mm-hmm.
tools that helped eliminate those issues, and we grow and grow. And then in the meantime, so the next year we'd have to acquire a fourplex. So that first goal setting retreat, we said, okay, we need to acquire at least a fourplex this year, 4 more units.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to save X amount, which means we have to control our finances to this degree. Okay, you have this budget, or you have this bonus at this time. And just like with the Dwight D. Eisenhower quote, the seller of our duplex reached back out to me much sooner than I was anticipating acquiring that next property.
Yeah.
But they were offering it to us at such a steal, essentially, that we had to finagle some things to make it work. And so, the plan went out the window, but we were still planning for something.
Yeah.
And so we had some room to move things around, and we're able to close on that and meet our deal, our goal for that year within the finance area of acquiring 4 more units.
And then, okay, so kind of you got the 2, you got the 4, and I know a little bit more of that background story, and you did amazing on that deal. So then, I mean, most people are like, okay, but from 4 to 8, 4 to 20, 4 to what? Like, that's a big leap. Okay.
Yeah.
So how did goals help you get there? Because anyone can just say, oh, you just were buying and buying and buying. But like specifically, like how did those goals and kind of creating that plan, go from 2 to 4 to where are you now? Let's talk a little bit more about.
Yeah. And so, so that next goal setting retreat, we had acquired 4 that year. And so, yeah, that next year was 8. And especially with our strategy of trying to double the acquisitions every year, we could set aside enough for a duplex or maybe a fourplex. We're fortunate to have, fairly solid W-2s.
Yeah.
But going up to 8 in a year, being able to put the down payment on that and any initial costs was starting to stretch that. Fortunately, we had also, this was in going into 22 to 23, and the market was still doing really well. And the properties had grown in valuation. That second property, we had gotten way under its value, even at acquisition. And so because we were continuously growing our skill sets and our knowledge in our community, based off of our goals for the year, became familiar with the 1031 exchange, made contact with a 1031 exchange provider out of Sioux Falls, where we do a lot of our acquisitions, and was able to 1031 the 2 properties into a 15 unit, which meets our total units needed for that year by 1 extra. And so, yeah, we rolled the duplex and fourplex into a 15 unit in 22. And then for this last year, to double that again, right, needs at least 16 more units.
Yep.
And so we're like, okay, definitely got to change some approaches on this one, and started getting a lot more familiar with the ins and outs of seller financing and private money, and started building a lot of those connections in both the Sioux Falls community and online. And this last year, we closed on a 20 unit in Sioux Falls, South Dakota for $2.3 million. And so that was negotiated with $450,000 down, so about 20%, and 80% seller financed. And I was able to bring in private money partners for the majority of the down payment. And so, without that, setting that goal up ahead of time to know what I'm going to need to do, and then having some time throughout the year to build those relationships, build those processes and systems, we wouldn't have been able to meet that goal.
Yeah, I mean, I love your story. I love every year you make a plan, you stick to the plan, and just so happens that because you've done all that, you get really lucky, right? It's it's always crazy how lucky people get when they properly plan, and have that, and start just cleaning the truck or whatever you want to say.
Vacuum the truck.
And it's that easy, and also that hard. And I also think it's really impressive how your goal setting has really changed and enhanced by sometimes the results that you are starting to accomplish. Because I know in myself, when I started just writing down maybe 5 goals a year, and I was like, wow, I did these things, right?
Yeah.
And then the next year I kind of pushed it a little bit more. And then I started creating quarterly goals, and I've done different things that I just see myself achieving so much more than if I didn't write them down, right? A goal not written down is a dream. And that's what I really think about, is like, hey, when I look at my goals, I look at my goals every single day. And there's power in that. And I think just a lot of people think it's really hard to get there. I bet if you went back, I know for a fact, if you went back 4 years ago and you told yourself, there's, will I have a 15 unit and a 20 unit? You would think you were crazy.
Yeah.
I mean, you would not think you would probably achieve those things, even though others around you were like, absolutely, Vince, you'll be able to achieve those things. So like, I don't know, like, what do you think the number one key to your success has been with just real estate in general?
It is the planning, right? And that's the kind of overall answer. But the components of that are accountability, right? I know you and I hold each other accountable for some different things. We catch up every now and then. I've got a few other partners at work or different places who hold me accountable where appropriate there. And it isn't even and it's reciprocal, right? I'm checking out. If you mention, hey, I need to do this thing by next week. When we talk, or even the night before that next week, I'm going to say, hey, did you do that thing, right? And even just knowing that you're going to ask me if that thing is done makes me do it, right? And
100%.
it's something I want to do, and I need to do, but we often procrastinate on things either because we just don't want to, or whatever it may be at the time. But even just knowing I'm going to have to tell you I did or didn't do the thing
Yeah.
is enough to sometimes make that nudge. And then building the systems to simplify it. And so whether it's we have different tools. We have smartwatches to track our fitness stuff. We have apps that we use to track our weightlifting. Because if it matters, then you'll measure it, right? What matters gets measured. What is measured matters. And so we're able to see like how far we've come, right? And
Yep.
we have an idea of where we want to get to. We're not set to become Mr. Olympia or anything, but
Sure.
just being able to scroll back on that history and say, oh, I can only lift that. I can only deadlift that. I can only squat that at a year ago, 2 years ago, whatever it might be. And being able to see that progress can sometimes give you that motivation to, okay, I can up my set today.
I love the fact that you circled around accountability, and I think it's so key. And I think that's kind of, why writing down your goals are so important, because when you're looking at it, you can hold yourself accountable. And to your point, I'm a big believer in tracking things, because you improve what you track. There's a million different sayings of why it's so important to write it down and track, and be able to go back there, whether it's a journal or a piece of paper or a fitness watch, and know where you were and be able to measure backwards on how far you've actually come. It's a huge momentum builder, and it's huge for everybody. And I think that's what a lot of times that gap is between someone that is successful and isn't successful, because when I don't feel successful, I can go back and say, look at the things I've accomplished. And I can self-motivate myself to say, look at these things that I never thought I would be, or I would have, but yet I have them. And it gives me that motivation and that self-determination to take that next step, or plant that next seed, when I have just as much doubt as anyone else, or have failed probably more than most people. But because you have that goal and you're looking forward and maybe not backwards, and it almost brings you back to your first, duplex. And you said you made every mistake in the book. And really what I was thinking is you learned a lot of lessons that have made you that much more successful, right? In your real estate endeavors. So kudos to you. Probably my last question for the audience is, how can others get started, right? Like if there was one thing, maybe it's the one thing book, but how can someone get started today? People are listening to this. It's February. They've already forgotten their goals. They never wrote them down. They've already failed on their weight loss, or they already drank in their dry January. So, hey, it's February. It's the middle of the year. How can someone start writing down goals today to achieve more in 2024?
Yeah, I think it comes down to is if this is something you want, you'll find a way. And so whether if you reach out to me, I'll send them anyone a copy of what I've put together. If it's reaching out to the One Thing company and seeing what they have available as free resources, there's a dozen different things I've come across as far as free resources just on Google. But find one, pick one that maybe works for you and aligns with what you want to do, whether it's just within real estate or starting a business or across all areas of your life as we do. But find something and do it. Set aside that time. Be very intentional. Get the kids or the dogs, somewhere safe and secure, not just locked in the basement with a PlayStation and some Z bars, but and do the work. It's just like everything else. It's gonna be uncomfortable the first time. Getting through that.
But if you're unwilling to write it down, are you really going to be willing to do it? Right.
Yeah.
And it's like, hey, if you can't find an hour or two to write down the things that are most important to you, you're never going to find that hundreds of hours to actually accomplish or do those things that are going to move you forward, that are going to lead to your success,
Yeah. And as far as takeaways, have 4 or 5 goals for the year, and then get really deliberate into those. What steps do I need to take to get there? Whether it's acquiring my first property by the end of the year, or my 10th property, whatever it may be, or I want to lose X weight. Okay, how many pounds do I need to lose a month? Okay, what process can I do to get there? Find the tools that'll enable you to do that, whether it's a Fitbit or there's a dozen different apps between Apple and Android that can track your food intake. And then again, going back to accountability, find someone to keep you accountable. And I think a key point of this is it can't just be your partner. There's some areas of life where, family related things where maybe it is your partner. But if it's something with your faith, find someone through your church or a group that can hold you accountable to show up to a Bible study or whatever it may be. If it's your fitness, even if you have to pay for it, a coach, a trainer is going to hold you accountable.
Yep.
They're going to check what you were eating. They're going to check if you've been, doing your push-ups, sit-ups, whatever it might be at home, getting your miles in. You may have to pay for that accountability, but because you pay for it, you'll also probably want to force yourself to get the value back out of it, and that'll make you reinforce you to do the thing. So yeah, if I had to give anything, it's write it down, build some tools and processes around it, and get accountability.
Love it. Okay, last question for sure. I see a sign behind you. It says Fortify. Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So another thing we did this year was look at all of our goals that we want to accomplish and come up with a word of the year. While also looking at what did this last year, how do we reflect on last year and what word comes to mind, and then for this year, where do we want to go with that? And so obviously, as you told, we've done a lot of growing over the last 4 years, especially within our real estate area, but we've sacrificed in other areas, and so we want to fortify. We want to fortify our bodies and be stronger and healthier. We want to fortify our relationships and our community. We want to fortify even our financial position. We've stretched a little thinner than maybe we would like, and so without putting a whole lot of extra capital into products or projects this year, how can we do that? And so, everyone that came to our meetup this year left with one of these. Was just, whatever their word of the year was, Mathis family, X family, word of the year 2024. So just another reminder to have around the house to remind you of why you're doing it.
I love it and love the one word. And my one word is fit, and really appreciate the nice poster I get in my wall that I get to look at every day when I walk into my office. It says fit, Shelton family. And, I think what I want people to really take away from today is goals aren't something that you write down once a year. They're not something you should just look at once a year. These are the constant reminders of the things that you want most that should push you forward. And writing them down or working with someone else really provides you that accountability. And so goals are incredibly important, especially as this focus of this podcast is the mindset, motivation, and methodologies of successful real estate investors. Goals give you a good mindset to think about. They give you the motivation because you're motivating yourself for what you actually want. And the things that Vince and I have talked about today, these are the methodologies that will help you ultimately achieve the goals that you set for yourself. So, incredibly important about goals. I'm never going to stop talking about goals on this podcast because they are so incredibly important. And, thank you to the audience for tuning in today, and commit to taking action today. Write down some goals for 2024 to move your investing forward. Take care, and God bless.